Welcome to OverBoost 46. OverBoost is a podcast interview series featuring discussions with speedrunners about their history in speedrunning and gaming and the runs they're passionate about. I am your host, PMC Trilogy, and with me today is TaintedTali. Tali, how are you? Thank you so much for joining me.
I'm doing good, and thank you so much for having me. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm ready for whatever summer 2021 is going to bring. I don't know how it is where you are.
Pretty much the same, I would say.
So I always like to start these conversations off with something recent, and in this case, it's going to be something that's not quite speedrunning. You had mentioned two things to me that you've been streaming right now. One of those is Alan Wake stuff. I'm gonna save that for a little later. But the other thing is this Resident Evil 4 fan game. And I caught a little bit of you streaming it live. You had also shared, I think, a VOD of one of your broadcasts where you were streaming it. Can you describe this for me? Let me know, how did you end up finding this? And also, are you a big Resident Evil 4 fan to begin with, or what is? I need the whole story here.
Alright, I wouldn't say I'm a big Resident Evil 4 fan, maybe. It's a great game, don't get me wrong, but I'm definitely a big Resident Evil fan in general. And I don't know how it started, but at some point, this became this whole meme on my channel that I'm apparently, really into Leon. He's my senpai, that whole thing. So I don't even remember how I found it, but I did stumble across this, probably 3 years ago, a demo for Resident Evil 4, the Otome edition. Which is a parody game of RE4, and if you don't know what it is, it's basically take Resident Evil 4, but make it into a visual novel and have it all from Ashley's perspective. And it's hilarious. I love it. And I've actually had a really good relationship with the developers as well, so when they finished it, which they did last week for the Resident Evil 25-year anniversary, they messaged me privately hey, it's done, here you go.
That's excellent. Yeah. It's really... I don't know if you saw any of this discourse, how active you are on Twitter, but of course we just had April Fool's Day, and one of the big things I noted was because there's always the normal April Fool's Day discourse, which is people who love the goofs, people who feel they're deceptive and mean. That's normal April Fool's Day. But this year in particular, I noticed that there was discourse about the fact that you still had some companies doing joke visual novels in a sort of mean-spirited way, in a sort of kicking down at the genre kind of way. Now, it sounds to me you're in touch with the devs for this game, for the Resident Evil 4 Ultimate Edition. This is probably a more healthy relationship with visual novels, something more like Hatoful Boyfriend, which was a genuine, ended up being a pretty genuine visual novel. Are you a fan of visual novels generally, or is this kind of an unusual turn for you?
It's normally not really my thing. No, I think the only other one I dabbled with was Dream Daddy Simulator, but normally it's not really something I'm very involved in, so to speak.
Well, I'm glad you had fun. I usually don't do much of that myself, but I ended up having someone in my community who was involved in development of a visual novel and did a stream of it. And it was a fun change of pace. So I definitely, to anyone who doesn't take visual novels seriously, I for sure recommend trying it once in a while, especially if you're a streamer too. Try that as well. Well, in that case, I already asked a little bit about gaming history and asked whether or not you're into visual novels, but let's go all the way back to the beginning. Where does gaming start for you? How does that come into your life?
That's been for as long as I can remember, really. I can't recall a specific instance where it started, but I guess PlayStation 1 maybe? That was at least when I was more into it, although I do remember my dad having Pong as well, so we go all the way back to that.
So your parents were already into games even before you were around?
Not heavily, no, but at least for my mom, she always liked to keep an eye on what's new. So when gaming became a thing, she was like, okay, I'll pick up a console for my kids. Let's see how this goes. So
was the PlayStation just kind of like a holiday gift kind of thing, or was that just for one of its? You said kids, so I'm guessing you might have siblings that you were sharing this stuff with.
Yeah, I have my brother as well that I shared it with, so we were both pretty into gaming, although me more than him.
So going from there, you talked a little bit about what were the kind of games that you would have been playing on PlayStation as a kid?
My first memory actually involves the demo disc for the PS1. So I remember playing quite a lot of Spyro, which is how I started getting into Spyro, the demo for the PS1 game. I played that so much that my mom ended up buying me the second game when that came out. And I guess my first ever speedrunning kind of thing happened then as well, because I had the demo for Dark Cloud. So I remember that was a timed demo. So basically you could play as much as you want within a certain time limit. So I would like race myself with how far I could make it into the game before the timer would cut off. So I guess I've been a speedrunner since then, but I didn't really take it seriously until much later.
That really makes me wonder. I always find those particular types of demos very interesting, where the demo includes a full build of the game to some extent, but it has some mechanism that either you reach a certain event or hit a timer, and then it stops. I mean, I can think of at least one game, Wild Arms, that has a speedrun category where you can use sequence breaks to break out of the demo and then finish the build of the game that is in the demo, which is not a finished build.
That is cool.
Yeah, so that's interesting. I feel like there might be other ones like that, but no, I definitely appreciate the demo disc thing. It's something I've been visiting on stream occasionally myself as well, and I encourage other people to do it too. Playing like the PlayStation Underground demo discs and the other ones of that ilk are definitely a very interesting window into that era. Lots of nostalgia.
Yeah. They had a wide category of options as well, because I remember, like, I've always been into horror games, but I've always been too scared to play them myself. So I know Project Zero, which is the European name for Fatal Frame, for those who may not know. I had that on my demo disc as well, and I remember I really wanted to, like, see what happened, but I couldn't play it myself. I was too scared, so I would invite friends over and, like, hey, can you play this so I can watch?
So you said, obviously Spyro was one that was big for you, but you also said that you've been a fan of Resident Evil for a long time. So, but you were not playing Resident Evil like 1 and 2 and 3 on your PlayStation because you're...
No, it came in way later for me. Funnily enough, Resident Evil 5 was my first Resident Evil. And for those who usually are Resident Evil fans, they'll probably be like, oh, but that's the worst one. But again, I was scared, so I didn't dare to play them. I would watch them on YouTube and stuff before like Twitch became huge, so I would watch all the games. But only when 5 came out, I actually dared to play it myself, and then I got really into it. I played 5, played 6, and then I went back and played the other ones as well.
Do you have, you started with 5, but you had an appreciation as a spectator for the more classic games. What was it like to actually play those games then, right? Because that's a very different creature to play, 1, 2, 3 Code Veronica.
Oh yeah, for sure. I never actually did get around to playing Code Veronica, but yeah, it's very different because like when you watch, like you know the game, but it's completely different when you play it because you don't really make a note of the puzzles, for example, in the same way as a spectator as you do when you actually need to be the player who solves it. So it's still a challenge to get into it as a player compared to watching it. So, but the lore has just always fascinated me.
I do feel like the Resident Evil series has always done a good job of creating it, kind of in the way that B movies do, of creating the perception that there is a lore that matters, even though it's not really true, but it's still fun.
Yeah, for sure.
Here's a milestone question for when you're growing up with games. A thing I like to ask is, was there a certain point where you might have taken more ownership of gaming as a hobby? And when I say that, usually the examples, like here's an example. When I was 15, I had a summer job and I saved up all my money and then bought a laptop for myself so that I could play PC games. Do you have any memories like that where you had like a first job and you're like, now I'm going to buy a 360 or, something to that effect?
Not really, no. So surprisingly enough, my mom's actually been really supportive of me playing games. So she would buy me the Xbox 360, I remember. So she wasn't always very impressed though, because even back to like elementary school, I do remember, I don't know if my mom knows, but I do remember actually skipping school to stay home and play The Sims. Because I remember we had like one of the school days where you're out in the woods and we happened to be right behind my house. And then my shoe broke, and it was snowy, so I was like, oh yeah, I just need to go home and like switch shoes. And then I just never came back. I went home to play games.
I mean, that's fair. I respect that. You just mentioned The Sims. Another question like that, because we're going to be talking about speedrunning stuff primarily, and so most of those are single-player games. But have you had big multiplayer phases over the years? And that can really be anything. That could be MMOs, MOBAs, your Call of Duty, Halos. Have you been into any of those in a big way?
I wouldn't say really in a big way. I guess the biggest one, I did get really into Heroes of the Storm for a while. That's probably like 4 years ago now, because I had some coworkers at work that would play it, and we always had like a lunch break where we all got together to play Heroes of the Storm. I guess that's the closest thing I've been to like more of a hardcore multiplayer experience.
Well, I mean, really anything that you spent a lot of time with. I didn't want to say that you had to necessarily go pro. I mean, I played Dota in like 2005, 2006, and then years later, MOBAs are huge, which is always wild to me. It makes me feel very, very ancient. But,
yeah, I remember actually playing Dota for a bit, but I've never been good at those games. So I remember hard. Just trying it out, and then people are toxic, and they would just tell people like, "Hey, you're not good. Uninstall the game." So I just didn't have fun with it and kind of dropped it.
No, that's very fair. Now, so one of the questions, of course, that I'm normally going to ask during a speedrun interview podcast is when did you discover speedrunning? But I feel like I gotta ask first, because I know you have and I'm gonna ask this open-ended because I want you to share as much as you're comfortable sharing, but you have some professional experience working with games, right?
Yes.
And so can you maybe give us a tour? Because my impression from talking to you before the interview was that you've been involved professionally with games before you were involved with speedrunning.
Yes, that's correct.
And so I want to ask, how did you learn about speedrunning? But is that story tied into your professional experience?
No, they're completely separate, actually.
Interesting. Because I just wasn't sure, just because over the years, the sort of I guess public knowledge of speedrunning, especially for people who work in games, has probably increased dramatically, and so I wasn't sure. I had to ask that. Well, in that case, let's do the. Do you want to mention what you've done professionally with games, or do you want to just move on from that?
Oh, we can talk about it. I don't mind.
So just give a tour then. Just mention mention what you've done.
All right. So started back in 2014 with what I thought at the time was just completely crazy. Because at the time I had this game store that I would frequent, which was like locally owned. So I had a pretty good relationship with the owners there. And at one point, they sent me a listing for like, hey, so there's this company that wants like Norwegian linguistic testers for their games. Like, have you thought about applying? So I sent in my application. I think this was probably like towards the end of the year, like fall, October or something. Sent off my application, and I don't remember if I did the test then or not. I think I did a test for them. And then it just... thank you for your application. Right now, we don't need anyone. So I'm like, okay, cool. Well, I shot my shot, That's how it goes. I didn't really expect to get anything anyway, because, working in games, it's like the pipe dream that you never really think can be real. So, but then months passed, and I think it was in April, the year after, they suddenly emailed me again, like, hey, you sent us an application way back. Are you still interested? So, I was like, of course I'm still interested. What's going on? So we did the whole process, I got an interview and everything, and they ended up hiring me. And I still remember at the time, like, this was in 2014, so I was like 24, and I was like, wow, they might be scamming me. Like, this is too good to be true. Like, this could not be real. So they set me up with a visa to work in Canada, which is not where I'm from, by the way. Mm-hmm. So I remember getting on a plane ticket and everything set up, because I had to pay for all of that myself. So I remember getting on the plane, heading to Canada. I was like, wow, I'm about to work in the games industry. There's probably not going to be anyone at the airport. I probably got scammed. But no, I didn't. There was someone meeting me at the airport, and I did get to work in the games industry over there for 3 months. And I got to work on Far Cry 4, which was a lot of fun. So it's probably one of the better jobs I've ever had. It was kind of surreal, because when we landed over there, the project had been delayed. So they were just like, yeah, for 2 weeks, just play Far Cry 3 to get familiar with the universe. You're familiar with the game before you get started. And yeah, we're paying you for just you playing Far Cry 3 for 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's interesting because I feel like when people, like when I hear about QA, it's like, no, like there's a process, there's a regimented process.
Oh, yeah.
You're doing things, you're looking for stuff. But it sounds like this first 2 weeks really was just play the game.
Yeah, the first 2 weeks really was just play the game because they weren't ready for us to actually start testing it yet. So, but they were like, well, you're already here, so we got to have you do something. So, get familiar with the universe. So you know more what to expect when the game actually comes in. So that was fun. It didn't last very long there, though, because they put me in French Canada, which I don't speak a word of French, so I didn't really have a social life outside of work. So as much as I really loved the work, I just didn't feel like staying there because, I can't have just work being my thing. So I went back home after 3 months over there when my contract ended. They offered me an extension, but I said no. And then, I was back doing my own thing, and I'm like, well, it was fun while it lasted, The dream was cool.
A good time to do it in life, I guess. Hopefully for you, it was. I feel like the early 20s, people was like, go places, do wild stuff.
Exactly. You got to try shoot your shot sometimes. But then I came across a listing from EA. They needed people to do customer support, which is what I was good at from before for their players in Ireland. Okay. So I ended up shooting an application for that because, even though it was EA, I was like, it's still a games industry, could be a good stepping stone maybe to something else. So figured once again, I'll shoot my shot, see how it goes. And then they ended up hiring me. So I flew to Ireland, worked customer support for EA for a year before they started up a live QA department at the same office that I was already working in. So I was like, you know what? I have QA experience. I'm going to see if I can get in there. Which I did. So then I started doing live QA. And I did that for about a year and a half before I decided that, okay, enough Ireland, I want to go home.
Enough Ireland? I don't know.
Yeah, it was lovely there, but I was on the West Coast, and I don't think the weather there really agreed with me because I've never been more sick than I have been during the time I lived there, so I had to go home. I had to leave.
I have a very personal story to share about that. My ancestors are from the northwest coast of Ireland. And I know the climate. I mean, when I say my ancestors, I mean like literally my father's parents. So pretty close. It's not too distant. But when I visited there a few years back, and it was the perfect climate, but it was also just horribly rainy and cold and damp and 50 degrees every day.
Yeah, and it's the wind as well because it rains sideways basically all the time.
Yep. So I know I get it. I love it, but I also get it.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I went home, decided to take some time off to just kind of recharge, figure out what my next steps were. And then I ended up applying for a job at Starbreeze for someone doing QA again there. And I got it. So went there, moved to Sweden, and then I did QA for, I think, about 4 months before they came in like, hey, so we have this upcoming project and we need someone to be more in touch with the community to help gather bugs and stuff from the beta and stuff while it's open, and eventually the live game as well. And since we know your experience with live QA, is this something you'd be interested in? So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll help with that. So I started to, watch what the community was saying. I would help volunteers to understand the game better. And at that point, I also started helping our players because I thought it was fun. It wasn't something they asked me to do. It was just, I enjoyed doing it. And then they realized, hey, you're kind of good at that. Would you make this your official thing? Do you want to be our community manager? And I was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And that's how I landed where I am today, basically.
That's interesting. I mean, sometimes, it's funny that, sometimes when you have the space, you can kind of, I guess, create your own opportunities. And it sounds like you were really able to do that. Yeah.
I feel like I'm just lucky for the most part, actually, but it's definitely been an interesting journey for sure.
No, that's great. All right, so we got that journey, and that's it's very interesting to see the way you jumped around, both literally, physically, and then also in terms of what you've been doing. But this is a speedrun review podcast, so I do need to ask, when did you learn about speedrunning?
I don't remember exactly when, but it was GDQ. I can say that much for sure, which is probably common for a lot of people as well, because GDQ is huge, so it's easy to reach people who may not know speedrunning. So I was watching that pretty much religiously for a while. It was mostly the horror block that I would tune in for, but then I would start tuning in for more and more, and I would end up watching the whole event, and I had friends who would watch it with me as well. And then I don't remember exactly what the turning point was, but at some point I was like, you know what? I should try this myself to, pick a game and see how it goes, just see if I can have fun with it. And I did. And it was fun.
What was the first game that you ended up doing a run of?
Spyro 2.
It was Spyro 2. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, was there any particular reason? Was it just because of the nostalgia? Was that kind of?
Yes. It was 100% nostalgia. And then I looked up a few runs as well, and it looked like it could be fun to do. So I decided to give it a shot.
And now from there, so Spyro 2, classic 3D platformer. But if you look at some of the other games in your profile, you have Alan Wake's American Nightmare, you have Remothered. So I feel like do you feel like you're going towards more horror stuff right now, or do you think you're just kind of game for whatever kind of stuff you want to speedrun?
I've realized recently that my niche seems to be horror and retro. So it's either one of those two or both. Seems to be my thing.
Okay, so I'm going to take a chance here and get a moment here and get a few takes. So you mentioned already, Spyro 2 was the first game that you had done a speed run of. Now, of the games that you have done a full run of, what is your favorite speed run that you have done?
That is a good question. I think it has to be Alan Wake's American Nightmare, actually, which is kind of a surprising one because I didn't actually go in intending to learn that game at all. Like, I hadn't even played it casually when I low-key decided that I wanted to run it. But I did want to run Alan Wake, the main game. But I was looking at the leaderboards, and it's, I think, 2.5 hours long, roughly. 2 hours, 33 minutes or something for the world record. So I'm like, well, it's definitely going to take me longer starting out. So it's quite a long game. But I had a friend who ran it as well, so I was asking him, like, hey, do you have any advice for, like, where to start with this game? And he told me that check out Alan Wake's American Nightmare because it has a lot of the same tech, but it's shorter. So you can just see how you like it, and then, if you like it, you can move on to the longer one. So I did it, and I'm really vibing with it. I'm really having a lot of fun.
No, that's really also, that's like just what a smart recommendation too. Shout out to whoever recommended it, because I feel like that kind of idea of like dip your toe in the water with a shorter game or a shorter category or something with similar tech is just like such a good way to go, because you get a chance to prime yourself completely. It's the kind of thing where, like, I think I recently read a book where someone talks about game development, where like it's more important to ship a small bad game and to have a full sense of how to ship a game than necessarily to like worry about starting with the right game. Getting the full process is just so essential. Yeah. What about now? I realize it seems like, when would you say you started speedrunning regularly? Because I know on the oldest PB on your speedrun.com profile is 10 months ago, but obviously that doesn't include all the ops or all the stuff that you might not have submitted. How long have you been speedrunning now?
Only about a year, actually, so it's pretty on point. The 80% category, which is my oldest one there, is the one I did first, and I didn't really enjoy it as much. I didn't stick with it, which is why it's the oldest one up there. So, but yeah, about a year. Now,
do you have a least favorite game and category of these that you of the ones that you've done? You're like, I'm probably not coming back to this one.
That would be probably Spyro 2 80%. Like, I do enjoy Spyro 2, but the 80% category probably isn't the best. I can see why that's not the most run category for that game.
What is it about Spyro 2 80% that just kind of makes it less popular than I'm guessing this? I'm not too familiar with the game, but I'm guessing the 14 Talisman is the one that's popular.
Oh yeah, 14 Talisman is the big one, but with the 80%, it's just really difficult. There are some tricks in it, because the game can be broken apart pretty easily, which is a lot of fun. But for the 80%, you basically skip to the end as fast as possible, so it's really just the first level that you do, and then you just skip through each homeworld to the bosses, and then directly to the end. But there are some of them, especially in the second world, into the second boss, that it's so hard to do, and it was so hard to learn, so I was just like, yeah, no, I'm gonna do a category that doesn't have that skip.
No, that's very, very... Sometimes there's not just because of difficulty glitches, but also you kind of miss too much of what you like about the game, when you cut it into pieces like that. How about a game that you would like to speedrun you haven't gotten around to yet? I know you've already have one answer for this, but I'm still going to ask this anyway in case you have other answers.
Yeah, I have a few that is on my list of things to do, actually. I have Obscure that I'm in the process of learning with a friend. We actually did get started, but then, life happens and schedules don't always line up, so we haven't finished learning it. I also do Dead Rising 2 off the record, but I haven't actually finished a run for the leaderboards on that. But I have learned the entire route. And again, Alan Wake, the main game, is still on my list. I've just been a bit distracted recently with American Nightmare and 102 Dalmatians as well. And I keep seeing games, I'm like, ooh, that might be fun to run. So I'm just trying to restrict myself and pace myself and, don't forget about the games that I already do as well.
Do you feel like at this time, now you mentioned you said you're trending towards horror. Are there certain things that you seem like you think you're looking for? Like, things could be like length, types of tricks. Is there anything that you feel like when you're looking at games, you're like, yes, this could be a speedrun for me?
I mostly look at if it's a game that I would enjoy, first of all, and then from there I will look up the length, because if it is too long, then I don't think I'll be able to stick with it. I think Alan Wake's basically going to be my limit for that, so I think 3 hours up is probably not something I'm going to stick to, but I don't really care much about skips or tricks necessarily. As long as I have fun with it, that's the main thing.
How about your favorite speedruns to watch that you have no plans to run yourself?
Oh, that's a good one. I would say horror games in general. I watch a lot of, you mentioned him before, Ecdysis. He does a lot of horror games, and he does a lot of different horror games as well. So I almost always religiously tune into his streams, because he streams while I work as well. So he's always up on my second monitor while I work with a bunch of different horror speedruns that I wouldn't really want to do, but they're so fun to watch.
It's so funny to me that, and it's true that his streaming schedule is your work day. Like that's just, I mean, it's true, but it's also very Ecdysis. I don't know if Ecdysis is going to listen to this, but Ecdysis was the most difficult person to schedule in OverBoost, because our only overlapping time was like 9 a.m. in the morning for me, just before he goes to bed.
Wow.
But it was still worth. I mean, actually, Ecdysis had plenty of cool stuff to say, so it's still worth talking to him. But
for sure.
But definitely a hard one to get the time overlap on. So you mentioned a bunch of stuff that here. Did you have anything else that you wanted to shout out in terms of runs that you don't plan to do yourself, but that you enjoy watching?
I don't think so. It's really just, I love horror games in general, watching them being run, because, again, I've used to grow up being scared of playing them myself, so it's really cool to see people just being able to remove that fear element almost completely and still play the games.
No, that's good. Now, another thing, so let's, we're saying speedrun adjacent. You've mentioned to me that, beyond speedrunning and, having some runs in marathons recently, or going on the Speedruns from the Crypt hotfix show, which Ecdysis runs, of course, you've been involved in organizing as well, which I always like to highlight. So I'm going to start with hosting stuff, because you had mentioned to me that you had done hosting duties for a few events recently, ESA Winter, Calithon, NoReset. What prompted you to get into hosting? What was your first hosting shift for a speedrun marathon?
I believe the first one was actually with Thunderthon. And the main reason I got into that is that it's actually run by a friend of mine. So he reached out like, hey, we're setting up our own charity marathon and we need people to host. Are you interested? So I was like, you know what? Sure, let's do it. I like speedrun marathons. I like to watch them. Maybe if I can help, that would be cool as well. So I tried, and turns out I'm kind of good at it. So.
Well, yeah, you certainly made an impression. You shared with me one clip from ESA Winter. I don't know if you want to relay the story, but it was quite vocal.
Yeah, it was a fun one. I remember for that, because usually what I do when I host as well, I would reach out to the runner beforehand with like, hey, is there anything I need to know about for your run? Like, when should I read donations? When shouldn't I read donations? And all those sort of things. And for this one, this was Serious Sam. Believe it was number 4. And I had talked to the runner before, and he had warned me, like, there will probably be some screaming donations, because there's a screaming enemy in the game, which is kind of a meme. So he's like, just be careful with your voice. That was what he told me. And, of course, the time came, we got a donation with the scream. So, I figured I have to, give his value for the money. So I'm going to scream.
No, that's definitely an honorable series. I think that was Tezzera, wasn't it? Was that the runner?
It was Tezzera,
yeah. Tezzera runs lots of great games, and I know other serious Sam runners too, and so I'm familiar with the screaming. It makes sense. It
was fun too, because the same donator would come back, because I had several shifts. I think I had 4 of them throughout the run, and he would recognize me. So he would come in for other games as well, and still do the Serious Sam for a scream meme just to get me to scream.
Very good. Very good. Now, you said your staff for Thunderthon. Do you do other things for Thunderthon besides hosting?
Yeah, it started out with just hosting, but I probably, because I have a lot of experience with community management and documentation as well, so I started to go like, hey, do we need this? Do we need that? So, I've written up a lot of documentation for them with like the runner guides and the host guides and all those sort of things. And I've ended up just taking on more and more, really, like the entire structure of the Discord server and like the social media. And I ended up doing just a lot of things, whatever I'm good at and whatever they need.
I mean, that kind of labor, I have not submitted to a Thunderthon, but whenever I've seen runs, like for example, when I'm, prepping for episodes of this podcast, I've had people in the past send me VODs of theirs from Thunderthon events. And I have been very impressed by the presentation, the marathon, and everything. So it's definitely, I feel like whoever is involved in Thunderthon is doing a good job, and I'm not surprised to hear that someone who has, I guess, professional experience with documentation and adjacent things is a part of that, because I feel like it shows. It seems a very, very well run event.
Thank you. Shout outs to Thunderthon and Chad Thorson, who's the main organizer.
Oh, is that okay? So that was. One of your VODs, Chad, was commentary, wasn't?
Yeah, of my Alan Wake one for Hotfix.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Now I'm connecting the dots. Yeah. Whenever I'm doing this podcast, I'm always sort of like trying to keep names in mind, because I want to like, potential future guests. I got to think about it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, good. We go way back from way before he was into speedrunning, or I was into speedrunning as well. I actually met him through my former job, because I was dabbling in voice acting for a little bit.
Okay.
And then a friend I worked with who was like, hey, a friend of a friend needs a voice actor. Are you interested? And so I met Chad. He was doing some animation stuff and needed a voice actor, and I did voice acting for him. And we're still friends to this day, and now we do speedrunning stuff together.
So it sounds like your abilities, your experience has impacted, some of your work here in speedrunning, especially with helping organize events and stuff like that. Has it flowed the other way? And I don't just mean like in like the literal strict sense, did a speedrunning event come up in community management sense, but I also mean this in like I always love to ask this in a general sense, because I once had an architect on the show, Musical Daredevil, who was like, I took speedrunning ideas to my architecture design program and figured out how to do things more optimally. Has speedrunning impacted your day job?
It kind of has, yeah. Like, I have a lot more respect for speedrunners now, being one with myself and interacting with a lot of them too. So what I have done once and that I want to do more of is that I've actually had, I guess you could call them events with our speedrunners for Payday 2 as well. So when we released a DLC, I don't remember exactly when this was, last fall, I believe. I would come on to one of the main speedrunners' stream, and we would speedrun the new heist together on like day one. And that was a lot of fun. So I guess it's just more respect for that kind of part of the community.
Would you have any words? Because I think I mentioned earlier that speedrunning is more public than it ever has been, especially with everyone being online so much during the pandemic. Do you have any words of wisdom for speedrunners who might be listening to this about interacting with developers, or for developers that have community managers and staff like that, about interacting with those folks, be it on Twitter or something? Obviously, be professional, be courteous, as I would hope everyone does. If you're listening to this podcast, you're not being courteous to people on Twitter, I will find you and I will stop you from listening to this podcast. But even beyond that, would you have anything to say?
I mean, just don't be afraid to reach out. Like, sure, as a community manager, I do get a lot of DMs, but I also love hearing from people. So don't be one of those people, especially if you're on the speedrunner side, who's like, I don't want to reach out to them. They're probably too busy. They probably don't care, blah, blah, blah. Like, don't think that. Just, shoot your shot. Send them that DM. Ask for whatever question you might have or whatever help you might want. And, shoot your shot. See what happens. Like, if you're, like you said, polite and courteous, more than likely you'll get a response.
Yeah, I think that the shoot your shot idea too is especially I think a good way to look at it, because sometimes you might not get a response, but if you're courteous and all you did was like, hey, here's this cool thing, like and you did it like once, you're not spamming them or harassing them or something like that. That's fine, right? Like that's just you did it didn't work out, but that's that's life. Not we don't not everything works out, but.
For sure, but at least you can say you tried.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. All right. Well, while we're on the note of, I guess, living our adult lives, a thing I do like to ask, especially because I think like the average age of people who game in speedrun is rising steadily. Like, I feel like my age gets older every day.
Unfortunately, yes.
Unfortunately, yes. I like to ask about, do you do anything to maintain good health? And when I ask about that, what I'm asking about specifically is usually hands, wrists, but also when it comes to sitting, and being sedentary, is there anything that you do in particular to, as a preventative measure?
Yeah, I do try to get up and stretch and move around a bit on the top of every hour, because I know, especially now as well, like everyone's working from home, which includes myself. There's just a lot of sitting, which isn't good for a long period of time. So I try to get up, move on top of every hour, and try to make sure that I always have at least a glass of water on my desk so I can stay hydrated. That's the main things that I do. And I'm also really lucky in the fact that I have dogs, because they force me to actually get out, as well as I don't just sit inside all day, but I have a reason to get out. I'm basically forced to get out multiple times per day, which is good for me.
All right. Well, now you mentioned pets. You're going to have to tell me about your dogs.
All right. Well, I have 2 pugs. Let's see. I have one right here, actually, so I can show them off. This is Qui-Gon.
Okay.
I have 2 pugs. They're both black pugs. They're very nice to have. It's good to have some company when we're all working from home.
Have you had them for a while?
Yes. He's about 7 years now, I believe. So he's getting old. He's a bit of an old boy. And the other one is Tebow. He's 5. So he's 2 years younger.
Okay. Have you always had pets, or was this something new? Or relatively new, I should say.
Pets. I used to have cats, though. This is the first time I actually have dogs. But yeah, I've always grew up with cats. And when I first moved from home, as well, moved into my own place, I actually would volunteer for local SPCA. So I would get foster kittens and help rehabilitate them before they were adopted. So yeah, I love pets.
Awesome. No, that's I'm a recent recent, I guess, recent convert to the world of pets. I think probably. It's been about like a year and a few months since my now wife moved into the house, and once she moved into my house, she was like, "Well, you have now given me the gift of living in a house instead of an apartment, and I've always wanted a dog. So guess what's happening? Mm-hmm. You're now going to be a dog owner, and it's been good. I have this is a maybe weird. I had never heard of this breed. We got a dog from a shelter." Didn't know what breed it was. It had a curly tail, so we were thinking like maybe like the shelter said Chow Chow mix, and we were like maybe Shiba mix or something. But she did a DNA test, and it got back primary breed Norwegian Elkhound mix.
Oh, I love those. My dad had one of those growing up, and they're beautiful.
Yeah, it's like 50% Norwegian Elkhound, like 25% some like Tennessee Coonhound, and the rest just like terror. But it was like, what is this breed? And of course, I go on YouTube, and there are tons of people who are very much into Norwegian Elkhounds. But I was just I never heard of that breed. But I guess it is a real thing that is around up there.
Yeah, pretty common over here.
Cool. No, that's great. I mean, he's a great dog. Diego is the dog. We've had it again. He's only probably 3 years old now, and hopefully he'll have a nice nice long muddy life, but good to hear. No, the dog definitely does get me out of the house too. I definitely that has been a welcome constant, especially a happy coincidence adopting him right before the pandemic.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like there may be mornings where I don't really want to go out, but it's good for me. It's good for them. So
it's still worth doing. So we were talking about health, and we're talking about obviously we were talking about standing up and getting up and being hydrated, and I mentioned also hands and wrists, and so I like to ask now, do you have takes when it comes to controllers? Do you have least favorite controllers?
I generally really like the Xbox One controller, but I'm really starting to enjoy the PlayStation controllers more now as well. Like the PlayStation 1 to 3 era didn't really work that well for me. Like they were fine, but from PS4 and especially the PS5 controller, if you've been able to hold one of those, it's just so comfortable.
I've heard good things though.
Yeah.
I think since the beginning of the year, anyone who I've had on the podcast who has had a PS5 has said that they love the DualSense controller.
It's so good. I don't actually have one, but I was able to try a coworker's one, and it just sits so well in your hands.
I am intrigued. It'll happen. I'll get hooked in at some point. We'll see.
Oh yeah.
But no, that's excited to hear too, because I feel like the people have the most divisive opinions about PlayStation controllers. It's really been all over the place, especially between you mentioned the different iterations of DualShock. One thing, actually, so here's a curious one, because I recently had someone on the podcast who was a big PlayStation 1 speedrunner, and they swore by the original PlayStation 1 controller, the pre-DualShock controller.
Okay.
Were you ever into that when you played as a kid? Would you have been playing with that controller or with the DualShock or?
I think I had the original one, although it might have been a DualShock as well. I don't remember, but I know for sure I had the PS1 console at least, but I don't remember exactly which of the controllers.
No, that's fair. That's I if I try to remember it too, it's very, very fuzzy. I think I mostly had DualShocks and then like one bad Mad Catz controller. I definitely
we don't talk about those.
Always the one, either that or Pelican or one of those brands. All right, so that's some good takes. Let me see what else. Well, okay, so here's a general question about speedrunning, which is, do you feel like you have a particular mission statement or role? Like when you go into a speedrun, I think you've mentioned before that your number one goal is to find a game that you enjoy playing, period. But when you're running, do you find yourself just like focused on improving your time? Do you like to look for improvements in a route, or do you find like anything draws you in particularly when you're speedrunning?
It really is the fun thing more than anything for me. Like I know a lot of people will get competitive about it, and I do get a little competitive with my own time as well. But I feel like there's a certain like threshold that I may hit where I'm fine with not getting better, if that makes sense. Like I primarily do it for fun, and I don't want to hit that level where it gets more of a chore or more of an annoyance for me trying to hit those good times over something that I enjoy doing. So it really is just a fun, and I'm not that good of a glitch hunter as well, which I guess I probably should be with my QA history, but I'm not.
I mean, maybe, I've always assumed that I wouldn't know enough about QA. That's almost a funny subject in itself when it comes to like the things that speedrunners do, because speedrunners are trying to break things, but I feel like usually, what happens is they find a break in the armor and then just shove as much in there as possible, which is like not normally what you would do. You were watching the stream before we started this podcast.
Yes.
And you noticed that I was having a problem with a game where one particular mission was crashing because I was trying to complete it in a certain way. And if you search that glitch on the internet, you'll find all these Steam threads where people say, I just fixed it by not using a helicopter during the mission. And you're like, and of course me, I'm like, well, that's not helpful. You can't just say go slow.
Exactly. It's not the speedrunner way.
It's not, like what are you doing here? So, but I think I mentioned that because it's idiosyncratic speedrunning. I think you're trying to look for particular things, and so I would imagine that QA is oriented towards creating the best game for the broadest number of people possible.
Yeah.
So I can understand why, even if someone might suspect there's some overlap, there wouldn't be quite as much as you would think. An equipment question. So. This is something I usually get into when I talk with people who are running some older games. Now, I noticed that for 102 Dalmatians and Spyro 2, both of which are PlayStation 1 games, your times on the leaderboards are all emulator times. So has that been your approach for those kinds of games, is to stick to emulator runs, to not worry about getting into the money hole that can be real hardware?
No, it was more as my entry point, I would say, more than anything, to kind of like see, how do I like this? Is this something that I enjoy doing and would maybe me try and do more seriously? Because I do actually have a PlayStation 2. I did also recently hook it up to a capture card, although I am waiting for a capture card that can handle a PS1 resolution as well. I don't have that quite yet. But I do want to do more of the hardware side as well. But emulator has been the way for me to kind of test it out and, see how it works and see if it's something that I would like to try and take more seriously.
What capture hardware do you have? It sounded like it was in the mail. Is it coming soon? What hardware is it?
I hope so. It's going to be a GV USB 2. I don't know if you heard about it. It would be the same one Excises use.
Yeah, I looked down because I was like, do I have that right here? I think that's downstairs because I was in a fight with that. But I am a person who is typically not too much of a stickler for latency, so I end up just opting to convert to HDMI and capture the HDMI. I know.
Yeah, that's my current setup, but it doesn't work for PS1, unfortunately. The resolution is too low, so it's not supported by my HD capture card.
Okay, I got you there. Yeah, that makes sense. I obviously you're probably aware that there's this whole universe of OSSCs and retro tinks and all those other things out there, which. I'm probably going to stay away from. Is that something that would interest you in the future if you kept playing PS1 games, or?
Maybe. I'm definitely interested in it, but I feel like the price point is a bit high as well. And downside to living where I am, they seem to be really hard to get, and it adds even more to the price point. Sure. So I'm fine with just getting the regular stuff, at least for now.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. Although actually, I recently had to wait for Royal Post Mail from the UK because I ordered one of those PS1 Mem Card Pros. I don't know if you saw what that is.
I don't think I did, no.
So this is a product that 8-Bit Mods, which I think is a UK-based developer, just came out with, where you can put a micro SD card into what fits into a PS1 memory card slot, and basically just never need another memory card, PS1 memory card. It only works for PS1 games. It does work on most PS2s, but again, only for PS1 games at this time. But it's got some neat bells and whistles because it also is able to automatically talk to an optical drive emulator that I have in one of my PS1s. So it automatically loads the corresponding. I spent too much money on it, but it's all this stuff, right? Cool. Yeah, it's neat, but it is what it is, for sure. All right, well, we got through a lot of these questions. Let's get to some of the specific games. It's particularly the universe of Alan Wake, because we had talked a little bit about Alan Wake's American Nightmare. I ended up watching you had done a GDQ hotfix for Speedruns from the Crypt of this game for 80% New Game Plus. But you mentioned that part of your introduction to why you picked up this game was that you were generally broadly interested in Alan Wake and speedrunning the full game, the original Alan Wake game. What is your history with Alan Wake? How did you get into that?
That goes way back to when the game first came out, actually. And again, I didn't play it myself at the time because this was still when I was too scared to basically touch any horror game. But I had a friend of mine who played a lot of horror games, and he picked it up. So I was hanging out at his place when he was playing it and watching him play, and I just really fell in love with the story. Mm-hmm. I remember he had me try and play a couple times as well, but he threw me basically directly into the fights without me having any knowledge of how the controls worked or anything, so it didn't go well. But I did pick it back up later on, and it just, again, really just adore the story in that game. And, it's been one of my probably most adored games of all time. So it just makes sense for me to pick it up for the speedrunning perspective as well. It's just one of those games that I can just really relax with.
That's so it's something that it sounds like you've returned to just casually, even apart from returning to it as a speedrun.
Yeah.
And now, was American Nightmare, because I know, again, the narrative is that you had expressed interest in speedrunning Alan Wake. Someone said, what about American Nightmare speedrun? Had you played the game casually before then?
No, that was when I decided to actually pick it. Like, I owned it. It was in my Steam library, but I'd never touched it. So I was aware of it existing, basically, but I'd never actually played it or looked into the story or anything like that for it before that.
Now, for this game, I saw that, the category that you had done for Speedruns from the Crypt was any % New Game Plus. And so, of course, whenever I see a leaderboard, I'm always very curious, like, what are the differences? And I went to the leaderboard, and I'm looking at it right now, and there is only New Game Plus.
Yes.
What's up? What's going on with American Nightmare?
So the short of it is basically the fact that you have a bunch of manuscript pages that you're supposed to collect, and once you collect them, they're on your account, basically. Unless you delete your save file, which is really tedious to do, you have them unlocked. So even if you click New Game in the main menu, you still have the manuscript pages, and they're used to unlock better weapons. So that's basically how it becomes a New Game Plus, because, you have a weapon that you wouldn't have if you recently just bought the game and jumped into it for the first time without doing anything.
No, that makes sense. I feel like there's a certain breed of game that's like that, where it's just sort of difficult to actually create a new game. And I guess even difficulty aside, it seems like there just must not be interest in doing that particular route, because I guess having those weapons helps things along.
Yeah, and it's pretty easy to do as well, because the main weapon that we do use in that speedrun only takes 10 manuscript pages. So if you have done even a single casual playthrough, even if you haven't gone out of your way to look for those pages, you have that unlocked, I'm pretty sure. So it's really easy to do.
Oh, I had this in my note. I should have mentioned this earlier, but I think while I was watching the speedruns from the Crypt VOD, I think I wrote down that apparently it was Demonic Robots who did this recommendation. Is that right? Okay.
Yes, it was.
I have had Demonic on the podcast before. A lot of fun to talk to. So yeah,
he's a great guy.
Yeah, shout outs to Demonic Robots. So at this point, are you kind of putting this run in the rearview mirror because you're going to move on to Alan Wake, or do you still have further things to accomplish with American Nightmare?
I definitely do have things that I want to do with it still, but I probably won't submit anything to the leaderboards for a while, because right now I did PB at the Hotfix show, Speedruns from the Crypt, so I feel like now I have a PB from GDQ on the leaderboard, so it needs to take something pretty big before I can replace that with something else. So, but I do think that I can get closer to the world record, because in that PB there's a cutscene skip and some other stuff that I didn't manage to get, so I know I can get a better time. But for now, I do want to take a bit of a break and before I recharge and come back to it.
Yeah, that was interesting, because I was watching it too, and I was thinking, because as one should do during a marathon, you were using some marathon safe strats. Yeah. And so it was definitely surprising at the end where you said, "Hey, I have a PB now."
I did not expect that at all.
Yeah.
There was a puzzle where I hit the wrong option, and there were definitely mistakes made, so I know 100% I can get a better time.
Excellent. Well, regardless of whether we see, Alan Wake or Alan Wake's American Nightmare, those games are fun. I've never played American Nightmare, but I did play, the original game, and that was, Remedy. Remedy pretty much always makes fun. Actually, I guess maybe now I can bring. Have you gotten at all into Control?
I haven't actually gotten around to it yet. I do want to do, right now I'm doing Alan Wake 100%, and then I want to dive into Quantum Break, which I kind of skipped the first time around. I don't remember exactly why, but I never really saw much of it, so I want to do Quantum Break first. And then I'm going to dive properly into Control as well. But I have watched Control, I've seen speedruns of Control, I watched casual playthroughs, and the DLC as well, of course, because they do have the Alan Wake DLC, so...
I was about to ask about that. Yeah, that must have drawn your attention.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right, well, let's So let's also touch base on Spyro 2. Now, you mentioned this was your first speedrun that you had finished runs of, but you also mentioned that you had moved on to the 14 Talisman from 80%. We covered that a little bit, but I did want to ask: is this a game that you have future plans for? Because it's interesting when I look at your speedrun.com profile, I see kind of horror, and then I see fun 3D platformer, and so I'm curious: are we going to see more Spyro or Spyro 2?
Probably. I'm not sure if I will be doing more 14 Tali because I'm actually pretty happy with the time I have given the current strats that I use. Because if you want to go for like the best times in Spyro 2, you need to do proxies and stuff, and those are tricks that I just don't really do or have a lot of fun with. So I stick with the safer strats, I guess you could say. But there are more categories for it. I have actually been looking at picking up. It's called Bone Dance Percent. Some of the more memeier categories. That I wanted to do, and that's one of the things that I wanted to do once I get that new capture card as well, because I tried capturing it with my current one and it just didn't work, sadly. So yeah, more categories, but probably not any of the 2 runs that I've already done.
Okay.
Unless I do it for like a marathon, because I have actually had a community challenge on my own stream right now where people have provided points for me to run through all the games that I currently know, so it'll be making a return for that.
Interesting. All right, interesting. So, well, on that note, I mentioned also, too, I have more questions, of course, about 102 Dalmatians, which is to say, like, was this a game that you had played when you were a kid, 102 Dalmatians?
Yes.
Okay.
It was.
So, did you watch the movie? Is this game connected to the live-action movie?
It is connected, yeah, and okay. I have watched the movie, but I don't really remember a lot of the movie, and I'm pretty sure the game story actually doesn't relate to the movie outside of it being the same characters.
Right. Well, they did get. I think I was reading the Wikipedia page for this game. They did get Frankie Muniz though for.
Oh yeah. He's voicing Domino.
No, I had an extended discussion about this with my spouse because I was like, well, I think I watched the animated 101 Dalmatians when I was a kid, and she's like, PMC, that film was from the 70s. I'm like, yeah, so like I don't remember anything that came after that. It's don't give me anything. So what brought you to come back to this game? Because I have to assume that maybe compared to something like Alan Wake, you probably weren't regularly revisiting this one, but you came back to it for a speedrun.
Yeah, this was actually a bit random. Again, I guess shoutouts to Demonic Robots because he was picking up another old game with dogs, Lassie. And at that point I was like, oh hey, I played a game with dogs. I wonder what 102 Dalmatians was like. So I ended up downloading that for the emulator and playing that again. And I was like, you know what, this is really fun. I wonder what the speedrun is like. And then I started speedrunning it.
And you submitted it to a few marathons too as well, because I think you had given me the 2 marathon VODs for this, both Calithon and Cozython.
Yeah, I had it at Fleet Fest as well, and it's just been accepted as well to UKSG, which is coming up later this month, actually.
Now, as someone who is doing a speedrun at multiple marathons, do you feel like there is a particular part of this run where you have like a bit for, where like, I have a joke prepared for this, or like, I think this is going to impress them, so I'm really going to sell it?
We do have a few bits, yeah. Like, I don't know if you've actually watched the 102 Dalmatians run, but the category that I currently do is called All Levels Inbounds, which means that you do visit all the levels. And most of them, they have, a level to them. But there's one that really doesn't. It's called Carnival. And it's really just, you run directly through the middle of the level from the start to the end. There's nothing to it. You just run. So every time that comes up at the marathon, we're like, oh, hardest level of the game coming up. This one's really important to, you gotta focus on this one. So I have my commentator just run that bit for me while I pretend to, like, really focus on the game. And that's it. And it's done.
I had asked earlier if you had watched the movies as a kid. Have you watched any Dalmatians films since speedrunning 102 Dalmatians?
I have not, no. Maybe I should.
I mean, I only ask just because I'm curious. I find myself very curious to revisit some of this stuff when I play licensed games. Like I think in the past few months I've played Spider-Man 2 and Minority Report games on stream, and so I rewatched those films. and some were received better than others in the household. Minority Report was well received, and apparently Spider-Man 2 is forbidden from the house. Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, yeah, apparently did not age well. I thought it was fun, but
I remember it being fun, but I haven't watched it in a while, so maybe it didn't age well.
Yeah, no, I'm always curious to see how, especially in our era of MCU films, to see how people feel about the old Sam Raimi Spider-Man films.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. We got the live commentary. So, you mentioned you're taking this, just got accepted to UKSG. Do you have other future plans for 102 Dalmatians?
Not that are set in stone right now, but I am planning on submitting it to GDQ, SGDQ 21. So, we'll see if we can get that in there or not. But I am also planning on picking up another category for it. So Tofu has been teaching me how to do all puppies. So I'm going to start running all puppies soon.
Ooh, all right. So that's okay. So all puppies, I guess puppies is collectible throughout the game.
Yeah, pretty much. So basically, the point of the game is you're supposed to save your siblings. So you're supposed to save all these puppies. But in the category that I currently run, it takes time. There's unskippable cutscenes whenever you save a puppy, so we skip them. You don't actually save any of the puppies. But we're going to be picking up the category where we do what we're supposed to do.
Sorry, I brought up the speedrun.com page, and because I always love to just see how people organize their leaderboards, and I'm looking at the 102 Dalmatians leaderboard, and my eyes got distracted by this bottom of the rules, which says previously the end of the run was on rescuing the last puppy without finishing Corella 4, which I assume is the fourth Corella fight, but not anymore. Apparently, so I guess. All right. Anyway, sorry, I can't get distracted by timing rules on stream, but that'd be fun. Do you feel like when it comes to speedruns, do you usually see yourself wanting to focus on usually always any percent, or do you feel like there's the reason, I guess the way I would frame this question is I've had guests on the show who always seem to gravitate towards, for example, a speedrun category that's an hour long. It could be the 100% category, it could be the any percent category, or the all this collectible category. But it's like that's like their ideal thing, and so they fix it to go that way. And so when it comes to something like this, do you think the all puppies is going to be like more your speed than all levels, or?
I'm not really sure. I think all levels is probably going to be like more of my ideal category, but it's sometimes nice to just break things up with something different as well. I mean, that's kind of what I did with Spyro 2 when I picked it up, because I had 90% and then I was able to break the pace a little bit with picking up 14 Talisman as well. So sometimes it's nice to just not fully burn out by just doing the same category over and over and kind of challenge yourself and challenge your muscle memory with something different.
Yeah, and it's also, do you feel like when you've moved on to Spyro 2 is an example of a game where you had started one category, moved on to the other, and then I can only assume, of course, it's easier to pick up the second category.
Oh yeah, for sure, because then you're already familiar with the base movement tech, so it's mainly just a new route and potentially new skips that goes with the route that you need to learn.
Now, I did want to ask, it's the oldest one on your profile, but what prompted you to do runs of Remothered? Because I feel like this run stands out from all the others. Even American Nightmare, that's a 3D movement game. I don't want to say too fluid, but like presumably if the movement in American Nightmare is like what I remember from Alan Wake, you are more active than your ordinary horror game protagonist in that, from what I recall. But Remothered looks more standard. That's not an action game.
No, it's not. It's not at all. Shout out to Igdices again, I guess, because I was watching Igdices a lot at this point, and Remothered was one of the games that he used to do quite a bit at this time. So I would watch him play it, and I was like, you know what? This sounds fun. This seems like one of those games that can kind of help me get into playing the horror games more without being as afraid of them, and kind of like see how I can do that whole speedrunning horror games thing. So I picked it up, and Drew Horror's Demonic Robots, both of them also run that game. They were great helping me out, and it was very fun to do.
Is this one that you're going to revisit at all, though?
I think it is, yeah.
Oh,
like,
yeah?
I've
Okay.
only done actually 2 runs of it, and I feel kind of bad because I know I could do much better. But I actually picked it up again to try and de-rust like 2 months ago, I think. But I need to get back and actually do more runs.
Now, of course, Remothered is in the vein of the Clock Tower series, which I'm sure you're familiar with from watching Ecdysis streams. Do you have any plans to work? Because again, this, as I mentioned, is a very different breed of game, but there is a series that is kind of similar. Do those games appeal to you?
I have actually been thinking of picking up Clock Tower 3 recently because I'm not sure if you're aware, but I actually also got recently accepted to the Twitch team of the Clock Tower.
Oh, yes.
So I feel like I need to kind of mark the occasion by actually learning a Clock Tower game.
And you think Clock Tower 3 would be the one?
I think so, yeah.
Now,
I have downloaded it, but haven't gotten around to actually playing it yet.
Why Clock? Because I feel like Clock Tower 3, if I were to look at the lengths of the games, Clock Tower 3 seems like it's on the longer side, but
yeah,
I guess that's still the one that appeals to you the most?
Yeah, like it's one of the ones that I'm most familiar with out of all the Clock Tower games for sure. Because again, Ecdysis used to play it a lot. I've seen Demonic Robots play it a lot. I actually commentated for Demonic Robots run as well when he did that for ESA. So I had to do a lot of studying up on the run already from doing that. So I'm already familiar enough with the run where I think that, it's going to be easier for me to learn that over any of the other ones.
No, that makes sense.
And that's also where the logo for the Clock Tower team is from Clock Tower 3. So I feel like it just fully embraced the meme at that point.
No, absolutely. I mean, I have watched. I think when I want to say when I prepared for both Ecdysis and Demonic Robots' episodes of OverBoost, I had the opportunity to not only catch them streaming it, but also sit down and watch VODs in preparation for an interview. And that game, that's a fun game to watch for sure.
Oh yeah, it is.
Especially if folks, if you're not familiar with Clock Tower 3 and you love anything Magical Girl, please treat yourself and check out Clock Tower 3. All right. Well, that is I think that is kind of the crop of runs there. Let's start, doing some kind of wind down questions as we get towards. So, folks, after I finish the wind down questions, we will have the opportunity for some Q&A, some live Q&A. So, please feel free to cook up some questions and have them ready. One of the things that I do as a part of this interview series is that I get a question from my previous guest for my next guest and kind of carry that forward. And so my last guest was Viper Racing, who had this question, which is, what is one book that you have read and has blown you away?
Wow, I actually haven't read that many books, so that's...
I was concerned. I was like, I can never tell if someone's big into reading books.
Yeah, but I did remember, I used to read Dan Brown's books back when I was in school. I really enjoyed Angels and Demons. That was a really cool one to read, which is a shame the movie just didn't live up to the justice of the book, but that's how it goes.
Have you played the, because I remember, isn't there like a 6th generation Da Vinci Code game?
I think it is, and I think I played that when it first came out as well, but it's only like fuzzy memories, and I'm not sure if I dare revisit it.
No, because I just know it's come up sometimes, and actually, is there really not a leaderboard for it? I thought for sure there'd be a leaderboard for it.
What? Okay, that's actually surprising.
I know, I'm surprised too.
Maybe it's time to start one.
Yeah, that's... Oh, there's a leaderboard for Da Vinci's Flying Robots, which I have no idea what that is. But all right, well, I guess
probably
folks,
not the same thing.
Yeah, it's free real estate there. The Da Vinci Code game. Well, that does mean that I do need from you a question for my next guest. I'm not going to tell you who that is right now. The next guest will be a speedrunner. The question doesn't have to be about speed running. Do you have anything in mind that you would love to throw out to this next OverBoost guest?
I will try to phrase it right, but maybe you can help me with the exact phrasing. But given my history as well with the games industry, how do they have a question or something that they would like to tell to the games industry, maybe of a game that they're actively running?
Okay, so would you have a question or comment for the games industry regarding the game you are actively running.
Yeah, or maybe the studio for the game that they're actively running. Yeah.
All right. I'll say, yeah.
Because I think that might be an interesting perspective to get. Like, if you can say anything to the studio that makes your favorite game, what would it be, basically?
That brings to mind, I'd be curious, if you want to pass on this one, you can pass on it. I know recently, besides horror runners, another group of runners that I've had a lot on the podcast are some of your classic PlayStation speedrunning. When I say that, I think of like Crash, Spyro, stuff like that. And recently, there was a big update for Crash 4. They did like a PS5 update, PC update. But a lot of the Crash runners were kind of unhappy because they felt like a bunch of very specific invisible walls appeared in the update. Which can feel very personal. I certainly obviously it's not a smoking gun. It's not like we're out to get. Now there was, you're probably familiar with the IGN Reacts videos, the developer. Oh, yeah. So there was one of those for Crash 4. So there is video of them reacting not in a flattering manner to some of these things, and suddenly invisible walls are there. Would you have anything to say for speedrunners and how to navigate that? Especially because, as I mentioned, for some people the reaction can feel very personal. Like, I was excited about your game, I shared this with you, and now this feels very punitive. And as I said, I'm couching this in language to say, like, well, make sure, folks, like, just because it looks that way doesn't mean it is that way. Would you have any comments to runners about this kind of situation?
It's kind of hard because, like, obviously there's a lot of balance that goes into that, because I don't think, I mean, I would like to think at least that no developer goes actively out of their way to harm the speedrunning community. But at the same time, I guess you would have to, like, think of the fact, could this affect casual players as well? Because obviously if it could impact the casual player experience, especially the first time playthrough, then that's something you might basically be forced to address as a game developer. So, but there's definitely a fine balance between doing that and, not tripping over your speedrunning, like, your most passionate fans in the progress. So maybe just try and have that other perspective in mind as well, that they might have had to do this for completely different reasons. It's not a slap in the face to you or something.
Yeah, no, I can definitely think I a while back, I think it was Maxi Lobes I had on the podcast, and he and I had talked about how initially, I think it was the Blair Witch, like the recent Blair Witch game from like a year or two ago, had speedrunning interest because it was trivial to get out of bounds. But it turns out it was too trivial to get out of bounds. And that, that reasonably, because it was impacting casual players, you could go on YouTube and find people just kind of falling out of bounds in a random place. And that got fixed. It had to get fixed. That was very, very reasonable. But of course, the same thing too is that it's funny with speedrunning attitudes. I could tell we're both pretty excited about solving the problem, the intended and unintended problems that video games create. But if you go onto the commenting sections on articles about speedrunning or videos about speedrunning, you find people who are like, this is against the spirit of the game. This wasn't what was intended. I have to imagine some of those folks might end up as developers. And of course, it's not like this isn't a crime. It's not a crime to have this opinion. I don't like it. I think it's a bad opinion, but it's not a crime. So you can make your game that way. But
yeah, for sure.
But I would hope, I would encourage people to let go of control. One other story I would point to is probably the Celeste developer, who regularly would be like, I made the game I wanted to make, but I also am like patient enough to understand that people end up playing it in different ways, and I'm going to support that too.
Yeah. And I know Control as well had the really good way to handle that as well, because if you're not familiar with it, the speedrunners will use a down-patched version of it. Because a lot of the stuff they use would impact casual players. But the studio was really great. Remedy is really great. They were working with them to like make sure that the speedrunners had options in place before they pushed the patches, so that they could continue speedrunning, and the casual players would get the fixes in place, so they wouldn't ruin their experience.
Yeah, it is really, really appreciated. I before the pandemic, I went to a Twitch Philadelphia meetup where I talked to a Hat in Time developer about how they maintained a separate fork for the speedrunners for that game. So that's really, really, really cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're talking here about games and games that are already out and being supported. Are there upcoming games that you are really excited to play and stream and find out about?
I mean, Alan Wake 2. When are we getting it, Remedy? Well, they are actually teasing it now that it could potentially end up being something that they're working on with Epic right now. So we're gonna be interesting to see if those rumors are true and what it's gonna end up looking like. I think it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago now, they actually gave us some gameplay of an Alan Wake 2. So, they've obviously been working on it. So I'm just hoping that it's not stuck in development hell and that will actually come out in a playable form. Yeah,
no, and I can only imagine, too, how the pandemic has impacted development. Yeah. So that's hopefully whatever was happening was already continuing along. Anything else besides Alan Wake, a potential, hopeful, coming soon Alan Wake 2 that you would want to shout out?
I mean, just came out actually just 2 days ago, Outriders. I've been having a lot of fun with that. It's if you're not familiar with it, it's a bit of a blend of like Destiny and Gears of War, and it has like that looter shooter thing, cover shooter specifically. It's been pretty fun. They've unfortunately had some server issues because launch and stuff that just unfortunately sometimes happens, and it's kind of out of your control. But once you're actually in there and playing it, it's so much fun.
Okay.
You can tell you're Googling it right now.
No, well, actually, I just noticed, so I usually don't have notifications turned on during the podcast because I don't want, audio alerts getting stuck in there, but the alerts, the video alert should play. Actually, no, I guess the video alert wouldn't play because I don't have it. Yeah, sorry. I usually, my apologies to the person who just gave me a tip, but I usually do not have alerts on during the podcast just because of that. But I will certainly address that in a little bit during the Q&A. But anyway, let's keep rolling along here. Who would be people in the community that you would want to shout? I know we've already talked about a few people like Dices, Demonic Robots, Tofu, Chad. Are there other people that you'd want to highlight as people that everyone should be watching?
Cosmic as well. We already talked about him, but he's also a good guy you should definitely check out. Jew Horse. He's just also recently joined the Clock Tower team, and he's been a great help with me as I picked up speedrunning and picked up more new games as well. There's probably a lot more, but like there's so many great people playing great games, especially in like the horror speedrunning community, so it's kind of hard to get everyone's mentions out there.
No, that's very, very, very good. Actually, I'm gonna commit this. The person here in the chat gave a very, very generous gift, and so I'm gonna do something I normally wouldn't do. I'm gonna pop up my break screen real quickly, just so I can play. They wanted the alert, so I'm gonna give them the alert.
All right.
Let's see here. I should be able to. There you go. Excellent. Thank you, Papa, for that very, very generous gift. Hopefully you're getting everything you want from this podcast. My apologies again for not getting there, but I just definitely wanted to note my appreciation for that. And we'll time to wrap up the formal part of this podcast. So I mentioned earlier, what you want to shout out. Now, where should people find you? Where should they be seeing your speedruns and your other stuff that you're working on?
Primarily on Twitch. TaintedTali is my name pretty much anywhere, so regardless of where you look for me, you should be able to find me on that. I do also put videos on YouTube, especially if it's a PB video or anything else noteworthy, so you can find the highlights kind of on there. And, I try to spend some time on Twitter as well if you want to see that side of things. So, again, TaintedTali on all the platforms, really. Yeah.
And so, of course, I should have this queued up if you're in here. Oh, what? Did that not fix? Oh, my goodness. I just did this. Okay, I guess it didn't actually promulgate. Wait a second here.
Although, talking about Viper and the BPG, I actually did host for him at Thunderthon when he got a world record run, so,
nice.
a good dude to follow as well.
All right, there we go. It is now fixed. It is actually, programming is hard. But, of course, if you're here with us live, you can see all of those links right there. You can follow her anywhere, on any of those places. And if you're listening to this after the fact, if you're listening on YouTube or Spotify, iTunes, etc., all of those links will be available in the podcast description, so you can go ahead and get those from there. TaintedTali, thank you so much for giving me all this time.
Thank you for having me. It's been so much fun.
Now, I do need one more thing from you before we conclude the formal script of the podcast, which is that I'm going to use a cheesy catchphrase like "Let's boost on out of here," and when I say that, I need you to give me your best rocket engine noise.
Okay.
All right, folks, thank you so much for listening. Let's boost on out of here. Oh no, can you just do it quickly again?
Did it not work? Did it get closer to the mic or something, or?
Yeah, no, I think it edited out because it counted as noise. I think the issue here. No, this is the issue because Discord sometimes I think decides that the rocket engine is noise and just cuts it out from the call altogether.
Yeah, it's like you don't need to hear this.
Yeah, but some people it doesn't do it, which makes me think that it's like Discord user settings. And
maybe
every once in a while I look into this thinking like, oh, I'll just tell people to change their Discord settings before the interview, but then I'll have several interviews in a row where there's no problem at all. If you want to try and give a rocket engine noise again, just
all right. Well, we'll try it once more. Do you want to do the bit first, or should I just go?
I'll do the bit. Thanks, folks, so much for listening. Let's boost on out of here. Discord hates that. Right. Discord hates that. It thinks it's noise. All right, I once added Discord on Twitter, and I was like, what is going on here? Anyway, folks, I guess we did not escape. The Discord is not permitting rocket engine noises.
We're not boosted out of here this time.
If you have questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. We've probably got a good half hour here on the front page. So I'm hoping people have some stuff ready to go. Also, Papa, again, thank you. Hopefully you saw I switched over to another scene to play the notification. Thank you again for that very generous gift. So, all right, Overkill has a question. Recently been introduced to reactions of game devs to QAs breaking their game apart. Do you have any stories about that?
I unfortunately don't, but I would love to have, because I have watched those videos myself as well, and it kind of makes me wish that we maybe had a more active speedrun community for our own game as well, because I would love to set something like that up myself and kind of make an event out of it. Because you have the IGN ones, but there's another one as well. I don't remember who set this up. It might have been the developers of Psychonauts themselves that set this up, because they had a runner come to their studio to play the game in front of them and kind of explain the speedrun, and it was so fun to watch. And I would love to do something like that. Yeah,
the one where the runner does Psychonauts for like Tim Schafer and the rest of Double Fine.
Exactly.
I think
it's so good.
I know the video production was, I think it was like player 1 or player 2 productions or something. It was very, very well made video too. They did not skimp on the value for that.
It looks like such a fun event to do as well. And it's just nice for the runner, I would imagine, as well, to kind of have that, being flown out to the studio. And I'm guessing, they got a studio tour and all that as well as a result of that whole thing. So I would love to do something like that.
Are there any speedrunners for, because I know Payday 2 is the kind of game that's like oriented around like specific like heists, right? Like that's the kind of game it is. So I imagine
it's more primarily ILs for the speedrun on
for
that.
ILs, exactly. Yeah, that would have been my guess. But I guess it's not too active, or.
Like, I mean, there's definitely runners who, stick with it for every heist, but like it doesn't really make sense in the same way. You can't really do like, a full playthrough or, show the whole thing. You would have to like pick individual heists or something like that.
Right. No, that makes sense. That's cool. Yeah, folks, if you have questions, we are taking live Q&A right now. So one of the questions I usually like to ask during this part is, just who would you like to see interviewed on this podcast? So I've already had Demonic Robots, Cosmic, and Ecdysis. So there are already episodes with them. Are there other people that you might have in mind?
Bring on G-Horse. I think he would have an interesting perspective, and he's from Singapore as well, and there's not a whole lot of Singaporean speedrunners, so he might have some cool stories to share as a result of that.
Yeah, no, I've definitely seen G-Horse at marathons, and also, of course, active in different communities. So, no, that would for sure be a good interview.
And he does a lot of terrible horror games and some gimmick retro games as well, like Bishibashi Special. So, you can have a lot of fun content there, I think.
No, absolutely. The whole retro space is so funny to dip into, because I feel like it's a mixture of the games we have nostalgia for, but also like the games that are from the same time period that we never played. And it's very. Have you had any games like that? Because like it sounds like 102 Dalmatians and Spyro 2 were both games that you had played, but has there been another 3D platformer of that era? You're like, I never played this, but this looks just like these other things.
I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of them out there. Like, I have seen friends play Tide Tasmanian Tiger, for example, which feels like it's a lot of the same thing, but it was never one that I really noticed as a kid. So.
Papa asks, I guess me, if I've had Fru on Overboost. And the answer is yes. Actually, I had mentioned earlier that, I had broadened the scope of Overboost after like 5 episodes. And Casey Fru was actually my very first kind of general speedrun interview podcast episode. So that's like Overboost 6. And I did have him on. We did an AGDQ 2021 preview episode that I had him and Plywood and Amber on. And that was a lot of fun too. Make asks, do you have any opinions on the recent phenomenon of often indie devs designing games to appeal to speedrunning or speedrunners? And I think too, also, I've seen these posts on our speedrun or another place. Actually, I had a dev when I was running a game recently, and they kind of reached out to me like, oh, what would make this game friendlier to speedrunners? As someone who's both doing community management professionally and also doing speedrunning, do you have any thoughts about this?
I actually didn't realize that was a phenomenon, but I have to say that sounds really cool, and that's definitely a niche that you would probably want to have as part of your community as well, because like, if you have a speedrunner, they're going to put a lot of time into your game, and if they really like it, they might, bring it to marathons, which gives, more people to be familiar with your game and who might pick it up in return as well. So I would say that's probably a smart thing to do.
Yeah, it's interesting the way that I often see this framed, because I think the idea of attracting people who are passionate about games to play your game in a very public manner seems a pretty smart idea. But it's often hard for me, because I think the two examples I would point out, recently, Umurangi Generation was a game where the developer showed up in my stream while I was playing it and doing speedruns of it, and they're coming out with like a patch in the future that's going to make it more speedrunning friendly. And then also I had Twitter interactions with an indie dev who's working on a game called The Chameleon, which was recently featured in the Haunted PS1 collection. Are you familiar with those?
Oh, yeah. I haven't actually seen all the games in that, but I am familiar with the collection, yeah.
Okay. So that was a game that's like, again, that PS1 aesthetic, and it's a stealth game, and they did like a small contest, like a little, here's the demo, whoever beats it the fastest, gets a prize. And actually, it was someone that I knew, someone that I work with occasionally, ended up capturing the prize for that. I think it was like $60 on Steam or something was the prize. So you can buy whatever game.
Nice.
And so, but it's often the hard thing is that especially when you see posts on the speedrunning subreddit, it's this like they come out and like, oh well, this game is for speedrunning, and the thing I always say is that like, you got to make a good game and then get the quality of life later. It's like,
oh yeah, for sure.
Because that's the thing I always try to say is like, there is no innately good speedrunning game. I can't stand 2D platformers. Get them away from me. I never want, and like some people, that's what they do. That's like what they love is 2D platformers. So, you know, I think the bad news is you have to make a fun game first, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, and I mean, there's no guaranteed success just because if speedrunners do pick up and like it as well, maybe you get, I don't know, 10 active runners. But unless it spreads from there, you only have those 10 people buying your game, and that's not really sustainable.
Sure. Yeah, no, I would, you know, I don't think it's particularly common. My understanding is that it is not common in the world of gaming for most studios to share their sales numbers. My understanding is it's hard to get that information.
Yeah, it is.
And so, but I would love the data on like post GDQs. Just for all of the games that can be legally acquired, of course. Like, you know, I definitely had a few anecdotes where people are like, oh, Just Cause 3, I'm going to go get that. And, you know, and of course it's regularly on sale too, you know, stuff like that. So,
I mean, it might be worth looking up because I know a lot of, if it is a publicly traded company, they'll usually do annual or quarterly reports where they do publish sales figures. So, you know, it is possible maybe to dig into those and try and find something, but I don't know exactly how detailed they will be if you can actually find specifically, oh yeah, GDQ had a big impact on this game.
Right. All right, Papa mentions enjoying speedruns more where the games get broken in a way that the developers never intended. I don't know, it's hard, like, yes, but also... Tali, how do you feel about the arbitrary code execution type of speedrun? Has that ever...
I mean... It really depends. I think it depends on the game because Spyro 2, again, going back to that, is definitely one of those games that you break it apart so easily because it has a feature or a trick that is called a double jump that was obviously never intended because you can just skip out of bounds and like almost immediately by doing that. But it is also very fun to be able to do that because you can jump pretty much anywhere you want through double jumping. But it's definitely not intended. But there are some games as well where I don't think it might be fun, maybe, to do it in that way. It really depends on the game again.
Sure, of course. All right, I think we got a two-parter here from Chaos. What do you expect from the speedrunning community in the future after COVID when people can finally come together again?
Oh, good question. I don't think I actually have any expectations, but, you know, GDQ is still going hot because I feel like it'll keep growing every year. More events are popping up. So, you know, I hope speedrunning can keep growing as a whole and to get more respect as well, because I would love to see especially more collaborations between studios and their speedrunning communities in the future. I think that would be awesome to see.
Have you done a lot of traveling to events? Because I mean, if you've been speedrunning mostly for a year now, the answer is you really probably haven't had an opportunity to go to an in-person event. But given the opportunity, would you expect to go to an ESA, a UKSG, or even as far as a GDQ?
Oh yeah, 100%. I was actually going to do that. I had plans lined up for, you know, TwitchCon Europe, which I think was supposed to happen in April 2020, but then, you know, March 2020 happened and all those plans kind of fell apart. But yeah, I do, as soon as it's safe to do so, I will definitely start visiting events, and that will be GDQ and also general games industry ones.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I'm usually not a person who is always so big on traveling, and then I had a very good experience at TwitchCon 2019 in San Diego, and I said, well, you know what? I'm not going to be able to make AGDQ 2020, but after that, I really want to start traveling to events. So, perfect timing, as it turns out. But you know, we'll see where we get from there. And then, okay, so Chaos asks, generally, what are your personal goals or achievements you want to reach in the future? I'm gonna assume that's, you know, in the nature of speedrunning community domain. Do you have like general goals at X number of games, or go to certain events, or anything that you'd want to put up there as prospective goals or achievements?
I mean, I would love to actually be able to go to a GDQ and maybe even like actually be featured. I am planning to submit now for the first time ever for a GDQ event, and even though I'm not expecting to get in, at least not now, it's like a pipe dream to be able to show something off at a GDQ or to be able to host for them as well.
What is your what would you say is your first choice if you could have any game automatically in GDQ? What would it be?
I'd probably do another Alan Wake's American Nightmare, because the Hotfix show, I'm really proud of how that turned out. It was a lot of fun. I think people watching it had a good time as well. So I would love to be able to do that at the actual main stage for GDQ, because I think that would be a good one. And like, it's a more bite-sized one as well. I don't think the main game would work so well. It's too long.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's it's a frustrating thing where and understandably, this is not me criticizing how they organize the event, but necessarily to justify longer games, you want to have games that are very broadly popular. So you will have longer games, but they're going to be the very, very, very most popular series. Your Zeldas, Pokemon, Mario, etc. But it's exciting. Once in a while you get something different. I know last at AGQ 2021 we had like Golden Sun. A lot of people were very very excited for that sort of that type of RPG appearing in the big event. Do you have any favorite GDQ runs that you remember watching? Because I know you mentioned that watching GDQ was something that got you interested in speedrunning. Are there runs that you would point back to and say like, oh yeah, I remember watching this one and I was just hooked from there?
Yeah, Dice's Nightcry run, which I think was at the last GDQ. That was so much fun, and he says it himself as well. That's probably his best GDQ presentation of all the ones he's had at a GDQ. So, yeah, if you like horror games and kind of shitty horror games, that's definitely something someone should go back and look up. It was so fun.
That is a really, really good VOD. That Nightcry, I remember I watched that Nightcry VOD back again before I talked to Dices for the podcast, and it is a good show.
That was my introduction to him, and I went to follow his private channel, and since then I've been pretty much always watching him almost whenever he streams. No,
that's excellent. Oh well, Papa had a very a not optimistic comment about COVID. I don't know. If you want to doom scroll about COVID, that is something you can do on the internet about all of that. I'm probably going to go ahead and say that's outside the scope of this podcast, but there are resources on the internet for you if you want to doom scroll on that.
I choose to hope for the best.
Yeah, no, I was able to get the first shot of the Moderna vaccine a few weeks ago, and I think I want to say maybe like 9 days from now, I'm due to get my second shot of the Moderna vaccine. So hopefully, that's good news. Have you had any luck out your way? I don't know. I've heard that America is very selfish about vaccines, and it is harder to get vaccines than the rest of the world. So I don't know how it's going where you are.
Yeah, no, there are vaccinating, but they're still pretty early on. It's mainly the elderly and the healthcare workers still over here, and I'm probably last in line, which, it's fine, because I probably, even if I were to get it right now, I wouldn't, start going out anyway. I would still stay inside, keep socially distant and all that, so I'm fine with waiting in that sense.
Yeah, that's the other thing too, right? Is that the thing that needs to change, of course, is the number of new cases, not that everyone gets vaccinated. Hopefully, the vaccines will contribute to the drop in cases, but that's the most important thing that we're all all waiting for. And hopefully, that means there'll also be fewer people suffering through it. There's been a few people in the speedrunning community, who've gotten COVID, and it sounded like it was real garbage. Eternal Enigma.
Yeah, I think Enigma has,
Yep, Enigma. Someone I used to watch for speedrunning, Puri had dealt with it, and even had some long haul type symptoms, which you definitely don't want to see. So hopefully we're reducing the number of that. Folks, we're still hanging out here. We're still on the front page actually. You got anything else? All right, we're reaching the bottom of the question bucket here. This is, I guess I must be. I think I got so flustered by that Just Cause 1 speedrun that I'm like, I can't believe all the things that happened.
Yeah, you had the worst luck possible by the things. Like, you got the marathon. Oh, that's never happened before, and everything.
I have never seen that game activate a conversation prompt from across the map. That was shocking. I do not know why that happened. And that's going to be haunting me for the foreseeable future.
That's how it goes sometimes.
Have you played? So we were talking a bit about Remedy stuff, and you said you know, you've watched Control speedruns. You are aware of the Alan Wake connection in the Control DLC. And then your first plan is also to go to Quantum Break. Have you played the because you know the original Remedy stuff is Max Payne 1 and 2. Have you played those?
I actually haven't, but I've been thinking that I should probably add those to my list as well. Might pick them up because I know the Max Payne 2 at least was out for the PS2, so I've been debating, you know, maybe that's something I should pick up and, you know, play it with my new capture card when that comes in.
I wonder what those would be like on. I mean, I imagine they'd be fine on console. I have no idea. I think I got them cheap on Steam or something and played them that way.
Yeah. Because I know Alan Wake has references back to Max Payne as well, so I think it would maybe be fun to play those and actually properly understand those references.
Yeah, I mean, Max Payne. What's you know, Max Payne has these like extended TV bits that you can find as like kind of like a sub story in the same way. I think Alan Wake has maybe some similar things too.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, so it's fun. It's great. You know, it does. Not a developer doesn't have to make the same game every time, but it is fun when Remedy includes those kinds of special touches.
It's kind of like flavor, like a signature, I guess you could say, on how they make their games, and I really adore their style personally. So
yeah, they're definitely very good. Is this what I'm gonna butcher this name? Can you say this name beginning with a Z in chat? Do you have chat open?
Chaos Katsu.
No. The Z one.
Previous one, Z one. Oh, Zetspisek.
Zetspisek.
I think that's right. I usually just call him Zets. I recognize the name.
Okay. Is this an American Nightmare runner? Is it?
He has picked it up because of me, yes.
Oh, okay.
You will see him on the leaderboards, but he runs Dishonored as well.
Oh, okay. That's a classic speed game. That's a all-time big one. All right, Chaos has some more good questions here. What do you find to be the most special attribute about the speedrunning community? You know, what does it contribute to the mainstream gaming community at large?
And what I find fascinating, or the most fascinating thing about speedrunners to me, is like their passion. Because you might watch a speedrunner and they might, you know, complain about the game in the moment, but if you look at like the hours they put into a game, like most runners will have the amount of attempts they have on a run visible on the live split. And like you can find people with thousands, even tens of thousands, or like potentially even hundreds of thousands of attempts of a single game. And it's so crazy how much time people put into a single game. And I adore that. I really respect that hustle.
No, it is definitely very interesting, especially when you see all of the like, especially the people who really do go deep on one game. Like I had a recent guest where they were north of 10,000 on like one of their major games, but it paid off. It was a game they loved. They got the top time. They took the same game to GDQ twice. You know, it was very, very interesting to see that pay off. But the dedication to the craft, especially the singular focus, is it's interesting. But also I find what's I'm the sort of person, I'm a very variety-oriented person. That's true both of games broadly as well as speedrunning. And I feel like, you know, if I put more than 200 hours in a game, I'm like, wow, I put a lot of time in that game. But, you know, when you see discussions about the amount of time put in games happen in Discords, usually what happens is there are a bunch of Dota or CSGO players lurking. And they come out and they're like, here's my screenshot of Steam where I've played, you know, thousands of hours in one of these games. And I don't know. Like, I guess I would. It's difficult to compare them because the rhythm of playing Dota or CS:GO is different than the rhythm of resets for a speedrun. But it's worth thinking about, especially in the singular focus too, right? Because, you know, with Dota or CS:GO, you're going to be getting different players, different heroes, different maps. Whereas with a reset, it's usually the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some games.
I mean, going back to Resident Evil 4 as well, like, it's crazy. I think that's one of the bigger examples for how some individual runners just put so much time into it. It basically becomes their career, if you want to be, especially if you want to be competitive in it. It's so crazy to see, like, the work people put into that game.
Do you have, so we're talking about, you know, the support that the community brings to the games, and the effort they put in the, oh, thank you, Apparently, okay. I guess I'd not muted. Well, that audio alert is making it to the podcast. Thank you very much, Papa, for also throwing out some gift subs to some folks, some excellent folks in there. I guess I'll put the little thing in there where you can get some secret sub channel in the Discord. And of course, the way I organize casual games is that people can pick a game and it goes into a list, and I have a whole poll system. So anybody who's hanging out in here, you are welcome to avail yourselves of that resource. The thing I was going to ask was, we're talking about speedruns, the resources that runners bring to bear on the singular games that they're focusing on. One of the things that's been interesting to me is the rise of, modifications with a speedrunning bent. And I think the number one term in this area is randomizers, of course. Have you dealt much at all with randomizers? Do you have a particular take on them? Because I normally randomizers is something that I would have only mentioned to like people running Link to the Past. But every time I have a guest on, there's a new randomizer for a new game. I've had Hollow Knight randomizers, Kingdom Hearts 2 randomizers. So I'm curious, have you had any interactions with randomizers, either as a speedrunner or otherwise?
Not really, no, but I know Resident Evil has randomizers as well. I believe the original remake has them, and it's really cool to see. And I imagine that if you do put as many hours into a game as we just talked about, that maybe it's a nice way to keep things fresh, because you may know your routes, you may know your tech, but now you suddenly don't know what items you're getting, and that's gonna change things up, and it gives you a completely new way to think about the game and how to handle things from there and really test your familiarity, I guess, with the game.
Oh, right. There's a randomizer for Ghost Runner? Was that made by fans, or was that by the developer? Because I know there are some very interesting examples of developer-made randomizers. I mean, famously, the Resident Evil 2 for N64 has a randomizer mode, which is astonishing. By fans. That's really interesting. I had been following Ghost Runner a little bit because I'm a fan of Brian Otto. And he had been very much into Ghost Runner around the time that came out. It randomizes enemy spawns. Have you played it, Zets? Is that something, or you're just kind of sharing the news about it? I'm curious if anyone's actually played it.
Yeah, I'd be curious about that as well. I haven't heard about that one, but I know Ghost Runner has had some interesting speedrun focus.
Oh, you're
I believe
for the board?
They had
okay.
a demo as well, where they had whoever speedruns it would get a prize or something.
Oh, right. There was a big speedrunning scene around the demo for that. I mean, I'm not surprised. I mean, a first-person movement-oriented game.
Oh, yeah. That was definitely a smart move from them, I think.
Yeah. I mean, look, I talked before, not every game is necessarily going to be speedrun-oriented, but, clearly, you care about the movement in that game. Oh,
yeah, for sure.
That makes sense. Chaos has another... we got thoughts here. We got esports thoughts, the most important thoughts.
Oh.
Big debate in Germany if esports is actually sports, is chess sports. Do you have thoughts about... And actually, Chaos, if you have any further clarifying questions about this, because the way I'm reading this is... I'm reading this there's a meme on the internet that whenever ESPN2 or ESPN3 shows competitive video gaming stuff, you always have these comment sections full of people what is this video gaming doing in my my sports channel? And so I don't know if this is what Chaos is touching on, or if if it's something else. How do you feel about esports in the universe of sports?
I mean, for me personally, it makes sense because, sure, it may not be the physical sport as some of the other ones are, but you still have, muscle memory is a huge thing, and, the mental thing as well with, knowing what to do and how to handle things, especially if it's, an RNG game or, we talked about randomizers just now. If you're doing a randomizer, it really tests your ability, but maybe not in the more traditional sense. But I feel like that doesn't mean you can discount them. It's just a modern continuation of sports, really. Mm-hmm. Or that's my take, anyway.
Yeah, no, I feel like I have a professional background in intellectual property law, and so I feel like the thing I always get preoccupied with is how video games necessarily have these IP law problems attached to them.
Yeah.
And I'm going to call them problems because, frankly, as long as copyright is like longer than any of us will ever live, then that's a problem because it means
copyright really needs to be modernized.
Yeah, it's a real struggle. And so the reason I bring it up is, of course, like I could go, I don't know, broadcast, film a baseball game, and Major League Baseball in America is not going to be able to stop me unless I started using their logo or something like that. But that's really trademark. I would be pretending to be Major League Baseball rather than just filming a baseball game. But if, technically speaking, when I stream League of Legends, or Smash Brothers, maybe that's the better example. Nintendo could be like, no, that's all those images in the game. That's our stuff. You can't do that. We can prevent you from doing so. And so it's like, I want to believe, that this kind of competitive gaming stuff can be the same sort of, long enjoyed, storied thing where people play it, people coach, people watch it, much in the same way that people, follow season after season of their favorite soccer or baseball or whatever. But it's hard when people own the rights to the games. I don't, that's part of why I think things like speedrunning and the fighting game community excite me, is because of how grassroots oriented they are, and how, if Nintendo forbade all streaming of Mario and Zelda games tomorrow, there would still be a speedrunning scene. There would be a chunk missing, but there would still be a speedrunning scene.
For sure.
But yeah, I don't know. I hope that competitive gaming, I hope that competitive gaming will be a normal and I guess gainful and productive thing. I think maybe besides the intellectual property stuff, I would also say my biggest concern is that the esports will develop the same problems as sports.
Yeah, that's of course a concern. I've seen a lot of comments from people as well where they're like, oh, but it's not the same, they're not, physically exerting themselves in the same way. And like, sure, it's not the same thing, but it's still, a physical test. Like, you're still honing your skills, just not in the same way as you would with, more physical sports, but still valid, in my opinion.
Right. I mean, there's still, I think a competitive aspect to it. And, and you get all those different things like, reaction time and age and all that. So yeah, I definitely don't have any issue considering it functionally basically the same. That I don't think the athletics is necessarily a requirement. And I say that because, I don't know, I enjoy watching a very slowly paced baseball game. And obviously there is some athletic showmanship in baseball, but it is a slower paced game. And that's fine. I don't really, I don't have a problem with that. I know some people think that's boring, but what are you going to do?
That's the beauty of life, I feel, because there's so many things out there that if something bores you, then, go on and find something that doesn't, and let the people who do enjoy the boring things, let them enjoy it, because clearly they enjoy it.
All right, I'm just scrolling through here. I think we had some enjoyment of my excess comments about esports, I think, but all right, as a part of the gaming industry but also someone who games yourself, do you have any specific criteria for what makes gaming enjoyable? Like, I mentioned before, I think I'd asked this question, are there things in the game that make you want to speedrun them? But I think this is maybe broader than that, which is, are there criteria that are necessary for you to enjoy a game? And then also, are there things that would make you not enjoy a game at all?
Not really, I think. Again, the main thing for me is that I have fun in the game that I play, and that applies, both casually and on the speedrunning stand. Like, what I tend to drive towards is story-driven games. So, if it has a good story, it's more likely to hook me than if it's, something that doesn't maybe have that much focus on the story. So.
That makes... Papa says escort missions. Yeah, no, I hear that.
So everyone's main, that and auto-scrollers, especially if you're talking about speedrunners.
Oh, here we go. Copy Fox asks, do you have games that you would recommend for new runners based on your experience?
Oh, well, Alan Wake's American Nightmare. I have gotten 2 people to pick it up already, and it's actually a really easy game to get into, like, especially if you do enjoy that kind of game casually as well, because, like, there is tech to it, but it's easy enough to do where you can run it without having that much practice and still get, a decent time. So, however, if you do want to go competitive, there's always, the bigger aspect of you need to put a lot more work into it. But it's one of those things that you can do, I don't know, a couple hours of runs and you can get a decent time and, be happy with it.
Between Spyro 2 and 102 Dalmatians, which is more beginner friendly?
I guess that depends on the category you go for. If you go for Spyro 2, don't do what I did and go for any percent, because I remember asking the runners about it and they told me the same thing, but I still went for any percent, and yeah, no, that was not the best beginning experience at all. Like, the general tech in Spyro is easy, like the double jump, super easy to pick up, but some of the skips, not so much. So, I guess 102 Dalmatian, especially the category that I currently do, which is all levels inbounds, super easy to pick up.
No, that sounds like the way I mean, honestly, it obviously depends on how easy or difficult the the glitch is, right? The inbounds or out of bounds sort of thing. But that definitely makes. Oh, Papa asks. I guess this is a question for me. Is Just Cause 3 easy to pick up? I would say the Sky Fortress category, which is the one I did for AGDQ 2021. Is pretty straightforward to pick up. It does not ask you, because the hardest part of learning Just Cause 3 is doing all of the memorization of the things that you have to blow up in provinces to get the to unlock further parts of the game, which you'd have to do for any percent. The Sky Fortress category sidesteps that, so if you're interested in Just Cause 3, I would look at those runs and focus on that. And those are also nice. My PB for that's low 40 minutes. It's a nice length, not 2.5, 3 hours. So
don't start there. I would say if you're just picking up speedrunning for the first time, you want something shorter and more bite sized.
No, I would definitely go for Sky Fortress. Okay, so thank you for all the questions. We'll be wrapping up here in just a few minutes. But if anyone else has any questions, speak now or forever hold your peace. That says that Darksiders is beginner friendly, but it's actually really, really hard. Is that is Darksiders the one where you just like constantly dash and there's like the one arena stage where you just sort of float out of bounds and wait for things to spawn in and fall and die? I might be thinking of a different run. I feel like I've seen that. It is okay. I'm right.
But I know Snets, and I know that he doesn't want to run it because it kills his hands. So I would say that probably doesn't sound like the best thing to start with.
Who am I think? I watched someone do a run of this recently, and now it's going to bother me unless I can. That was Henny. It was Holy Henny who runs this game. That's what it was. Okay. I knew something in my mind. Do I need confidence? I mean, I would love to see more runners in Just Cause. No game for Just Cause. I think the most active that whole series has ever been at any one time was a few months after Just Cause 3 launched. There was 1 month where 4 different people did runs. And that was the height of Just Cause series speedrunning. And it's never really recovered since like March 2016. But that's fine. I get why people don't want to spend time on it.
Does it have the same issues as you had in Just Cause 1 with crashes happening 50 minutes into the run and other weird stuff?
Just Cause 3. Does Just Cause 3 have those issues? Just Cause 3's biggest technical problem from a performance standpoint is that it just doesn't run well. And so you need to have, like, if you are not trucking around with 16 gigabytes of memory, you will be punished. You will 100% be punished, and which is less of a problem now than it was in 2016. Oh yeah, sure. Conflicting interest. I totally forgot about that. Okay, there is totally there's one mission where you just need a cutscene to play to end the level. Normal stuff. And sometimes it just doesn't happen. And what that means is that you have to reset to a checkpoint. Resetting to the checkpoint, though, undoes some of the stuff that the speedrunner does. Like, for example, one of the things that you do in that level is that you avoid getting heat. And otherwise, you would have to get rid of the heat before you could let the cutscene play. So that makes sense, right? You avoid ever getting heat. You can go straight to the cutscene. That's fast. Yeah. But, you know, if the cutscene doesn't play, then it's actually slow.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
So Papa is correct. All right, well, it is about time. Do you have a raid target that I could send people to?
Oh, I haven't looked. Let me have a look real quick.
Take a look at your following page or whatever other resource, and we'll see where things
see who's live.
Yeah. If you don't have anybody, I see at least a few people one of whom I could bother. So.
I see one actually. If we're in the mood for some Dishonored 2 speedruns.
Sure.
Can just drop you the name and Discord there.
Okay. All right, let me get that. All right, so yeah, it's 2:00 now. I will go ahead and queue this up. Let me do this. Discovering new things about. Yeah, here we go. All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much for giving me all this time. This was a lot of fun, and definitely I mean, great to talk about these games, but also I definitely very much appreciate you providing all your professional perspectives as well.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great to be able to talk more about what I do and what I like. And it's kind of fun that someone takes an interest in it. I'm so glad to have all these stories shared. So I'm really happy for that. And but anyway, I'll let you get to your day and end the call, and hopefully I'll see you around at an event sometime in the future. I hope so too. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Take care.
You too.